Hi, welcome to another episode of Habits for Humans, the podcast that explores what makes people tick and how to program this brain of ours through habits. We're going to explore why in some areas we can really rock it and do great things, while in other areas and at other times in our lives we can really struggle. I'm your host, Pamela Henrie, and today I'm so excited to be speaking with our guest today, Jeremy Williams. And Jeremy is an expert in time management. And today we're going to be talking about maximizing your productivity by mastering your time, and more specifically, counterbalancing life and work, because that's an area that so many people struggle with. We have several giveaways that we will have for our listeners, so make sure that if you like free stuff, you listen till the end. But first, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Habits for Humans is brought to you by Card Salad. Card Salad is an Eat Well program that's kind of like HelloFresh meets Oprah. So you can get a free week of meal planning done for you at the end of this podcast. And it's also brought to you by The Success Choice, a company that provides tools to help you filter through the noise of life and establish positive routines to find balance, order, and joy in the journey. So make sure you stay tuned for some special discounts. So I'm excited to introduce our guest. Jeremy Williams is the owner of Red Hawk Coaching. It's a coaching company that works with small business owners, helping them to create efficiencies and maximize their productivity. They help them establish the mindset of a champion and provide guidance to help clients soar in both business and life. Jeremy is the best-selling author of Survive, Scale, Soar. He is a husband and a father of 2 amazing children. Excuse me. So, Jeremy, we always start our episodes, let me get this over here, with a way that you can manage stress of your life, like a daily routine or a habit that you have that helps you to maximize your day and to manage your stress. What would that be for you?
So we'll talk about this as we dive into time management, but it really starts the night before, and it's creating that routine in your life of going to bed at a certain time so that you wake up at the same time every day. And so I would say that the morning routine and getting your day started to make sure that you're not stressed out. I've got kids and it can get crazy and we're going in a million different directions. And just knowing that I'm going to start my day out, getting up at the same time and having that morning planned out will take away a lot of that stress and the chaos.
Yeah, and I think that that's not an easy thing to do, to get up at the same time every day. My husband has that routine and I struggle with it more than he does. But I really do feel like I feel so much better when I have that consistent routine of getting up at the same time every day. Even if I didn't go to bed as early as I wanted, just kind of having that consistent routine is helpful. That's awesome.
Yeah, we had our kids last week. They were out of school, so they had a February break, and so that threw that routine out. So it's having that routine that it's okay to leave that, but if you come back to it, you find that comfort and that relief of stress, just knowing that, hey, if I wake up at this time, I can get these things done and get everybody they need to their places. And like anything, it's a habit. So you have to develop that habit, and habits are sometimes not easy to form.
Right. They're not easy, but we crave habits and we crave structure. And, you mentioned your kids. I know that kids especially will fight against structure, but they crave structure. And there's, there's a freedom with having that structure, like you were mentioning.
Oh, absolutely.
So tell me how you got started in this coaching business.
So back in 2000, I graduated from college and then went and spent a couple of years nonprofit working for the YMCA of Greater Houston. Then I had the individual that helped us sell our home, our first home when my wife and I got married. Just in passing said, hey, you would make a great real estate agent. And so I took that to heart. And 6 months later, I was out of the nonprofit world and into the for-profit world of selling real estate. Little did I know, first day on the job, got a listing, sold it 2 weeks later, and I was like, man, this is going to be a piece of cake. My next sale didn't come for another 6 months. So I quickly realized that I needed to build and develop my skill set. So I went on to build a really nice business for myself in 2010. I got tapped to be in a leadership role with one of the largest brokerages in the Houston area. Spent a couple of years there. That's where I was introduced into coaching back in 2010. And so I worked with real estate agents, whether they were brand new to the business, had been in the business for a long time, had built mega teams. And that's where I'd gotten my start in training in how to coach individuals. I spent a couple of years there, moved to another brokerage on the north side of Houston in the area of the Woodlands. Spent another 2 years there coaching, also building their organization, ended up doubling their organization, helping it grow to $1 billion company. And then had the opportunity to come back to my home base where I started it all, continued coaching there, even spent some time working with a team out of Portland. And in 2017, we had Harvey. So Harvey flooded about 20% of the Kingwood area, which is where I'm from. And so it impacted all the people that were working with my team, my expansion team. So I had to make the decision then, do I continue to coach and consult and rebuild that? Or do I pursue something that I'd always wanted to do? And that was to build my own coaching program, independent coaching program. And that's when I launched Red Hawk Coaching, was in September of 2017.
Great. And so time management, I'm guessing, is something most people struggle with because we all live complex lives. We, work is a portion of our lives for most of us, but we live full lives, and trying to find that balance is not an easy thing. So tell me some of your tips for finding that balance.
Yeah, so when I coach with people, I always tell them to look for the counterbalance. Like if we were to have the exact balance in life and the exact balance in business, and we're always trying to seek that, we'd go crazy. So I coach on counterbalance. There's going to be times where you spend a lot more time over here with your family and your relationships and things not pertaining to work. There's going to be times where you're going to be on the other side where you're spending more time in work. And either one of those is okay, just as long as you don't stay there for an extended period of time. And so I give them a formula, and it was actually shared by a coach that I had. And it's works really well because it addresses life first. And if we can get our life structured, then the business will follow. And so the first thing that I encourage, and we started with this, is what time do you go to bed? And the next one would obviously be, what time do you awake? And so you ask yourself, how many hours do I need to sleep in order to be functional? I ask myself, if I want to be the grouchy Jeremy, it's going to be this number of hours. And if I'm going to be the fully productive Jeremy, I need this amount of hours. And I need about 7.5 hours. I coach people that need 3 or 4 hours. I coach people that need like 8 or 9 hours. So each of us are different, and we have to kind of figure that out for ourselves. But once we have that, everything else that happens, whether it's business or life, happens between those times. And so those are the first two things on the calendar. Being spiritual, the next thing on my calendar is time spent with God. So that could be prayer, that could be reading scripture, that could be doing whatever I need to do to get centered spiritually in my life, because that impacts everything. The third thing that goes on the schedule is your rocks. So rocks are things that aren't movable. And for instance, a rock today was to be on the podcast. Like it was going to be from 11:30 to 12:30, wasn't going to move. It was on there. A doctor's appointment would be a personal rock, or a vacation would be a personal rock. But those things that happen that cannot be moved. If you've got a conference, Pamela, they're not going to call you and say, hey, Pamela, when do you think we should have the conference? Like they're going to have it scheduled in. And that'll be the time that it happens. So rocks go on your calendar next. And then it gets into an acronym called LIFE. So LIFE. So L stands for love and relationships. So your spouse, I had my coach goes, well, when's the last time you had a date night out with my wife? And I looked at my schedule and I said, gosh, it's been a little while. And he just kind of jokingly, but not jokingly said, "Hey, do you want to stay married?"
Yeah.
And so, making sure that you
Are those
have
priorities, right?
absolutely right. And we'll go back and talk about why it's in this order. But making sure that your relationships, whether it be your spouse or your kids or your family, your extended family or friends, put that time on the calendar, because otherwise it won't happen, or it could potentially slip into the background. So we were talking about counterbalance and somebody shifting way over to the work side and neglecting the relationships. Well, those relationships aren't going to wait around for you, and relationships take work. So they need to go onto your calendar. And so that's the first thing in respect to life. The second is I. So that's improvement. That could be coaching. It could be reading a book. It could be watching YouTube videos on something that just stretches your mind. If you look at older populations and those later in their years that are thriving, a lot of times they're reading books, they're reading the newspaper, they're watching television, they're feeding their mind with things every single day. And so we got to work on ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. And it takes work and it takes time. And that's anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes a day. So you're not going to spend your whole day working on yourself, just 15 to 20 minutes. And those small wins as they stack, you'll notice in time. I mean, I even look back where I was a year ago to the person I am now, and it's a big difference. It's those little improvements over time.
Yeah,
So
exponential improvement. Really, it does.
Mhm.
And there's sometimes the toughest things. I think the things that you're mentioning here, um, you don't necessarily get the immediate benefit of that, and so sometimes it's tough to stick with something that you're not seeing necessarily that immediate benefit. But like you said, over time, that just compounds on itself, and is so important.
Yeah,
So
it's a darn instant gratification, right? It's like
yeah,
driving to McDonald's and you go to the deal and you order your hamburger, and 30 seconds later they're throwing it into the car and you're able to eat. Sometimes we look at life like that and think, okay, well, if we work on our improvement and we study and learn something today, it's going to give us benefit right back. The ROI is going to be there instantly. And the reality is, it may be something that helps you 6, 7, 8 months down the road, years down the road. So yeah, great point.
so you were at I. So
So we're into F. So fitness and nutrition. Nutrition is actually probably the more important part of that. What we eat and feed ourselves, the fuel that we give ourselves, is what's going to get us through our day. And then obviously having exercise as well. We talk about making sure that we give our all. And if we're not feeding ourselves and fueling ourselves properly, and we're not exercising, then you're going to notice as you get into your day, it's going to get tougher. You only have so much glucose that's going to feed your brain. So eventually that's all going to deplete, and it's going to be harder and harder as you go through the day. So that's why a lot of people focus their biggest task in the morning. Brian Tracy, eat your frog, eat the biggest frog first. And if there's 2 frogs, eat the biggest and ugliest first, is because we know that as your day goes, your energy drains. But we can help prolong that to some extent by making sure that we're eating properly and that we're doing the right exercise. The last one is E, and that's economic. And so we've done wake up, go to bed, wake up, spiritual time, our rocks, our relationships, our improvement, our fitness, and E, the economic part, is our business part. So a lot of people go, why is that last? And the reason being is, if all that other stuff that precedes is not in order, it's very hard to build a successful business. If you don't have
your foundation, right? You're building your foundation so that you have something to work from. Yeah. Because truly, when you have stress in these other areas, I always say, you can neglect those other areas, but eventually they won't be neglected. You might end up with a divorce, which takes a lot of time and energy, or you might end up with an illness that takes a lot of time and energy, or a child that's struggling that takes a lot of time and energy. So if you're not taking care of those foundational things, eventually they won't be neglected, right?
Yeah. Well, and I know people that have built from the outside, it looks like a very successful business. They've got tons of money, a nice house, nice car, all these different things. But then when you start talking to them and asking them questions about relationships, they have none. So, if you're not working on that in advance, you could build a successful business still, but then you get there and you realize you have nobody to celebrate it with.
Right. Right. I love that. I love the getting that foundation in there and then how that strengthens the economic. But with all of your coaching that you've been doing, what's an area that people struggle the most in implementing with this, and what advice do you give them?
Yeah, the biggest part is the first ones, the going to bed and staying up. I work with the real estate industry primarily. I do work with other small businesses. Yet the real estate industry, there's just this, I guess they have this feeling that they've got to be available 24/7. So they're answering calls and emails at 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then they're working on paperwork and things that quite frankly, really nothing's going to happen at that time of night. It's going to happen, you can go to sleep and put it on the table and it'll be there the next day. But there's just this feeling that, and it's a lot of sales industries where people feel like, okay, if I don't respond or I don't do this now, I'm going to lose a sell. And that's not necessarily true. A lot of that is just mindset. And so they struggle with that. Okay, I need to get into that routine of, I do need to go to bed at some point. I do need to wake up at some point. And then also the struggle with just being able to turn the business off. That's a huge struggle. I've been through that personally, especially in my sales career, turning that off. And I think a lot of individuals struggle with that. And a lot of that comes from fear. They have the fear that something will happen, or they'll lose that sell, or I can't go on this vacation now, because if I do, I know I'm supposed to meet with clients. And so instead of trying to figure out a solution, they'll just give up the vacation and stay home and work.
Interesting. So, yeah, focusing on the fear instead of trying to find a way, basically, to make it happen. So, when you're coaching people, do you just help them get over that mindset issue and help them to focus on the important things?
Yeah, so I help them in terms of, I can't give them necessarily the solution. I can ask them questions. And that's what I focus on as a coach, is asking really powerful questions, digging in and finding out maybe some of the root causes to where they can realize the solution themselves. Because at the end of the day, I could tell and give strategies and do all these different things, but if they don't find ownership in it, or if they don't understand the reason why they're choosing to do it, then it's going to be that they're going to get stuck there, and it's going to be very difficult to get out of. So a lot of people ask, well, what do you do as a coach? And I say, I ask great questions.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's true, and you have children. And so I'm sure, you can tell kids what to do all day long, but until they decide, a lot of times they'll come and say, oh, hey, mom, they'll tell me some great idea that they had that I've been telling them for years, but now it's their idea. Suddenly it clicked. They saw how it worked in their lives, and now it's their idea and they implement it. So I think that's very key, is helping it be coming from them, asking the right questions to help them determine what their priorities are and how living those priorities will benefit them in the long run.
And I think it's easier with kids. A lot of people argue that, but I think it's easier with kids than it is with adults that have gotten set in their ways and their habits have developed, and they've learned a thing and made choices that have kind of boxed them into this corner that they're now trying to free themselves from. So kids, I still feel that every once in a while too. They come back and they do something, and they're like, and they make it their idea. That could be a whole nother blog or podcast, is how to make other people think it was their idea. But I find it's a lot easier with them, and though sometimes it can be a struggle, than it is with somebody that's an adult that has already formed some habits.
Well, and this is where I feel like having a coach is such an advantage, because we do get stuck in these habits and these old routines and these ways of thinking that we think are normal. and productive, but sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to make us really question that and maybe make some better choices that lead to better results. So I think, having somebody on the outside to ask those questions is that in and of itself is super helpful.
Yeah, we all have our blind spots. And as a coach, I have a coach. There's things that I can't even see. And so that coach is like, giving you that 30,000 foot perspective. They're looking down, they're kind of seeing everything that's happening, and you're on this path, and it looks like you're going off a cliff, but you're going to go no matter what. And that coach can say, hey, is this alternative better? Or have you thought about it in this way? Or did you realize that maybe, your emotions were getting ahead, and you weren't being driven necessarily by logic? And so being able to ask those questions, and sometimes they're really tough questions. I have clients that sometimes they'll tell me they hate me, but they know it's a good hate. It's like they're like, yes, I needed to hear that, and nobody else would tell me. So, telling people and asking them the questions that really kind of dive in there, and sometimes they hurt. Yet it's in that hurt that they find that growth, and they realize, okay, well, maybe I do it this way, or maybe I take a new approach, or sometimes it's a affirmation. Sometimes I get coaching clients that'll come to me and they'll ask me things. I'm like, that sounds absolutely great. They're just looking sometimes for affirmation.
Yeah, yeah, just kind of a second opinion that supports them. And a lot of people don't have that support, especially, real estate agents is kind of your specialty. A lot of times they're kind of doing it mostly themselves and motivating themselves. And, they don't have a boss that's telling them what to do. And so it's great to have some structure there that you've created here with your program, and, having an outside coach to keep them on track, because sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself.
Absolutely. And sometimes, a lot of times individuals, and I also coach teams, and I also coach brokers, that recruit and bring in people to their brokerage. And even with teams, sometimes having that perspective, because now you're dealing with personal dynamics between people. And that's a whole nother type of coaching on, well, how do you handle this situation? Or, I'm got my master's certification in DISC. And so understanding, behavior and being able to coach people around, well, that's probably coming because they're a D, or they're an I, or, they're more analytical and step oriented, and you're more of the social butterfly. So that's why you're in conflict with each other, and looking for those different things to where they can find the wins in those relationships.
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah, personality and different ways we approach things really plays a role. So, just for a little bit of practical application, tell me maybe your morning routine and evening routine, or a morning and evening routine of one of your clients that you find might be helpful.
So my personal routine is we get up at the same time every day. So it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and it'll vary. It depends on when my daughter is a trainer for athletics at the high school. So some days she goes in early, some days she goes in late. So getting up and making sure that she gets to where she needs to be, or to the bus stop. Waking up my son, making sure he's going to be ready to go by the designated time to get out the door. I start my day reading some scripture and prayer. Grab myself a cup of coffee, and I'll sit there and I'll check my emails and social media, see if there's anything I need to respond to immediately. I check my calendar for the day. I look at what my rocks are going to be, so that I know I don't double book myself or put anything in the way of that. And then I start into my day. So my days, I pretty much live in 30-minute blocks. My coaching is 30 minutes. Sometimes they're back to back to back to back. And, sometimes I have time in between. So I look at my schedule and I take some of those activities that are in the economic part of my schedule, and those business strategies now from my business plan go onto my calendar. So I'm working those. I wrap my day by 4 o'clock. That's the time I have to go pick up my son. I come back, I check my email, I'll check my QuickBooks and finances, and then I'm off for the day. So by 6 o'clock, I'm off, I'm eating dinner, and I have nothing in my schedule until I go to bed. And I go to bed about 10:30.
Okay.
Start the next day over. Now it'll fluctuate. Weekends, I tend to stay up a little longer. We'll go out on a date night or something like that. So, the schedule changes, but I always know what's coming. And just knowing that it brings comfort, knowing that even though there's a lot of stuff and a lot of moving parts, you know where you're going to be next.
Yeah, that's good. So, is there anything in particular you do for your own self care that rejuvenates you?
I like walking. We have 80 miles of trails throughout our community, so I can hop on a trail. I can go a different direction every day, and for me, that gives me relief. Riding my Peloton, I like to ride my Peloton, and I've got weights to be able to do workouts with that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, because I think that that's really an easily neglected area. Like you were saying with sleep, and, there are certain areas that are so easy to neglect because you don't see just like we don't see the immediate result of something positive that we're doing oftentimes, we also don't see the negative result of things that we're neglecting, until
Until it's too late. Yeah,
late.
and absolutely, and I'm working on my weight loss journey right now, and I struggled with that for probably the last 7-8 years, and finally have to make a decision to deal with that and get better in that area. And I can tell you, it was 100% a result of work, and because you get so ingrained into what you're doing, the time goes by, and then you have the obligations with kids and family and everything else that can't be canceled. And so, if you're not taking care of yourself first, you're not going to be able to take care of a lot of other people. So, if anybody's struggling with that, I really encourage you to take a look at that part of your life and figure out how you put that on the schedule and then follow that schedule. That's the thing we didn't talk about is you can create the schedule, the calendar, and it can look pretty and it's all time blocked. Yet the other half of that is you have to implement it. And that's the other part I see people struggle with a lot is I'll ask them, did you do your lead generation? And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, okay, well, what did you do? And they give me something else. I said, well, your schedule's telling me lead generation. Why did you choose not to do that? And then I'll ask another question and find out they didn't do their workout that day, or they skipped lunch. And so you can have a great schedule, but if you're not following it, then you're not going to see the benefits.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah, getting those big rocks in there and then following your schedule. That's great advice. Well, awesome. This time always goes by so quickly. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you today, Jeremy, and I think that you've talked about some really great nuggets that so many people in whatever business or realm of life they're in can benefit from. I really liked your life acronym and getting that foundation established, because so many times work really does take a big portion of our day, and sometimes that can be all encompassing, but really focusing on that foundation I think is so critical that we need to hear, people need to hear.
Well, Pamela, I appreciate the opportunity, and I trust somebody will hear something today that'll move them to change their schedule or work on their schedule so that they too can have huge amount of success, and both in business and in life.
And I liked your talking about counterbalancing. I think it is a myth that we need to spend equal time in each area of our life all the time, but that's just not reality. Sometimes one area of your life will, take over for a bit, but not neglecting the other areas, and making sure that you come back to those areas is so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. It's healthy to be in those for an extreme. You just can't stay there.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the key, is just to, have those important foundational things as a part of your routine so that they don't get neglected. Even though you may not be spending as much time, you're not neglecting and keeping that in there. So again, just as a reminder that we have some giveaways. We have a giveaway from our sponsor, Card Salad. So make sure when you go to habitsforhumans.com, you can sign up for the free 7-day Eat Real Food Challenge. You get 7 days of recipes done for you. You get a shopping list, you get your meal planning done. That I know for me, a lot of times figuring out what to make for dinner each night can be the biggest challenge, the biggest hassle when you're already tired. trying to figure that out and eat something healthy. Our second sponsor is a Success Choice. And do you want to start implementing positive habits right away? The Success Choice Planner and the Success Choice Challenge Workshop are the perfect tools. You can save 15% today at thesuccesschoice.com using the coupon code Habits for Humans. And these are all in the show notes. And also, our guest today, Jeremy, has a awesome giveaway as well. His book is Survive, Scale, Soar, and he has a digital training and learning program that there will be a link to that as well in the show notes. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Jeremy, again for joining us and for your great words of wisdom. And remember, Habits for Humans is the podcast of developing positive habits. And remember to check our show notes to get all of your free gifts. And thank you in advance for giving us a positive review. Have a wonderful day.